But if the United States uses nuclear weapons, that changes the entire equation. And I do believe that both Russia and China will have to demonstrate that they too are insane.
Hi, I'm happy to be here today with Scott Ritter from scottritter.com. He's a former UN weapons inspector. Scott, thanks for joining the Trends Journal.
Thanks for having me.
I want to get right into it, obviously, about Iran. Donald Trump gave an interview last night on Tuesday to Fox News, and he said some things that were taken as outrageous on social media. I want to play one of them right off the bat. Here's Trump on Fox News last night.
I would do that. Do you anticipate that the strikes we're seeing this week against Iran will expand? Are you considering hitting energy targets or other locations inside of Iran?
I'll save the energy targets for last, but ultimately we'll hit energy targets, yeah. But we're going to hit them very hard tonight. We're going to hit them very hard tomorrow night. We're going to hit them very hard the night after. And then next week it gets really bad for them because next week comes the power plants. Next week comes the bridges. We're going to knock out all their power plants. We're going to knock out all their bridges unless they get to the table and negotiate.
That's Donald Trump making new threats against Iran. Where does he come? Where's he coming from, Scott? And does the U.S. have the ability to punish Iran in that kind of way?
Look, Donald Trump gave away the farm several times here. We have to. You can't just view Donald Trump in isolation when he says things. You have to look at the totality of the statements. So we know a couple things. We know that the United States together with Israel, waged a 39-day war against Iran that they lost. They didn't achieve any of their objectives. Some things emerged. One was the ability of Iran to seize control of the Strait of Hormuz and the inability of the United States to change that reality. I think it should be made clear that if we could have taken the Strait of Hormuz, we would have taken the Strait of Hormuz. We tried for 39 days and we failed. So we have to reflect on that. Iran was able to outlast the United States in terms of sustainability of kinetic action. That's a term that the West likes to use. Things that go boom. The Iranians have more things that can go boom than the United States has things that can go boom, especially in the conventional sphere. And the United States ran out of things that go boom. That's why we had to sue for peace. We also ran out of things that can shoot down things that go boom. And we haven't resolved those problems. There was the memorandum of understanding was not a comprehensive peace deal. It never was intended to be. The Iranians were smarter than everybody when they said this is really a waste of time, but we're going to go through with it anyways. Donald Trump admitted that he was compelled to sign the memorandum of understanding because there was an energy crisis. He said, we're running out of everything. In 4 weeks, we're going to have nothing left. I had to sign it. And J.D. Vance explained why he had to sign it. Oh, we're just buying time. Forget about the MOU. It's meaningless. It's just to buy time. It was a vehicle to buy time for us to get more oil and to do other things, like take all of the other long-range strike weapons left in our inventory, all the other effective air defense weapons, and strip Europe and Asia clean and build up our stockpiles. So we know that happened. Donald Trump basically said that he expects this war to go on for 3 weeks. Sometimes Donald Trump says things that are more honest than he possibly knows. 3 weeks is the extent to which we can sustain this conflict on the pace that we're doing right now. We have 3 weeks of war fighting capability. And then what happens? We run out of ammunition, just like we did at the end of 39 days. People tend to forget that. We ran out of ammunition. Do you know why we had to quit the war? Because we couldn't fight it anymore. We're out of, we'll run out of ammunition. So now when Donald Trump tries to spin this, he says we have a 3-phased plan. Phase 1, week 1, we just bomb stuff. We let them know that we can bomb stuff. Pro tip, Donnie baby, they know you can bomb stuff. You did it for 39 days. They just didn't blink. So they're not going to blink. But now, week 2, phase 2, we're going to change the targeting and strike energy facilities. Now, this is an interesting concept because, you just announced that you're going to strike energy facilities. Not the smartest thing in the world to do. Because what will Iran do? I know what I would do, and I know what the Iraqis have done in the past when they threatened with bombing. I know what the Iranians have done in the past. You strip out critical infrastructure. You strip out the parts that can't be replaced, and you put them into deep storage. You downgrade your energy production capacity, your energy generation, power generation capacity, in preparation for receiving the attack. You try to safeguard as much as possible, and you let the United States plow through it. And then because that will fail, we're not going to achieve any result. But meanwhile, by creating this target deck, the United States just legitimized Iran, taking out the totality of the energy production infrastructure of the Middle East. So Bahrain will lose, Manama will lose the ability to generate electricity, Kuwait City will lose, Dubai, Abu Dhabi. We can go on and on and on. This is a sword that cuts both ways. Now, Donald Trump doesn't care because he's in Washington, D.C., and the only power outage he's going to have is when people use too much air conditioning. But this would be devastating for his erstwhile allies in the Middle East, because Iran isn't just going to sit there and let you take out energy production facilities, energy generation, power generation. They'll take out critical infrastructure too. And you're going to see the regional neighbors scream in pain. And anybody who doubts Iran's ability to do that, understand, look at the accuracy of the Iranian missile strikes. They're hitting what they're aiming at. We can't shoot them down, right? We can't shoot. And oh, by the way, we're running out of those missile interceptors too. The one ran out of last time we brought in, we're running out of them again. We're using them in big numbers. But then we moved to 3, the ability to produce energy. Again, the Iranians, knowing this is coming, will remove critical infrastructure, safeguard others, and just start toning things down so the destruction will be minimized. But the moment we bomb Iranian energy production, Iran will take out the UAE's energy production, Qatar's energy production, Kuwait's energy production, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia's energy production, and this will be a disaster for everybody. And then after that, we run out of ammunition. We don't have anything left. So all the Iranians have to do is ride through these 3 phases Don you talked about. Yeah. Then we run out of ammunition. They don't. And then we're going to get into a problem where Donald Trump is having, Yogi Berra visions. It's deja vu all over again. And suddenly it's not going to be, we're 4 weeks from losing everything. It's going to be, we lost everything because there's nothing left. I mean, I used this analogy before. I like it, so I'll use it again. Body surfing. I used to body surf in Hawaii. It was fun. I wasn't very good at it, and I wiped out a lot. And sometimes I got in waters that were too much for me. And I'd go out there, and a big wave would pick me up and put me down. When it puts you down, it puts you under, and you're held under the water. And you're sitting there floating. Because the one thing you learn is you just don't fight the wave. Don't fight the wave. Just let it do its thing. You got you got water, you got oxygen in your lungs. Just ride it out. And eventually the wave will let you go, and you go to the top, and you start swimming to shore. But sometimes if the wave holds you down a little too long, as you come up to take that air, second wave hits you, puts you down. And you can only survive so many cycles of that before you drown. I mean, that's how people drown in these things. I've almost drowned many times because I'll go through the 3rd or 4th cycle and literally I'll be out of air. I went back to Hawaii when my kids were 10 years old, and I was going to show them how Daddy did it when he was their age. I took them to the beach, sandy beach, and went out there, and they're watching Daddy swim out there and Daddy body surf, and then Daddy disappeared, and the waves kept coming, and Daddy didn't pop up. Daddy was dying. Daddy was under the water, couldn't get up, trapped, and Daddy finally struggled to the shore and decided that Daddy was done body surfing in Hawaii.
That was the end of it.
But the point of bringing this up is that Donald Trump has put the world through a very damaging cycle. The energy that's produced, by the Middle East, Americans tend to think of gasoline and diesel because that's what we know. We go to the gas pump and look at gas prices. Oh my God, they've gone up. Amazing. What we don't look at is fertilizer. I don't hear too many Americans talking about fertilizer. And yet the sulfur that comes from the sour oil that's produced, that sulfur is a key product for fertilizer production. So is ammonia. The fertilizer that comes out of the Middle East, plays an important role in helping crops around the world, especially in the developing world, be viable. But we lost that for 39 days, and we didn't get a full restoration of that. There's a huge hiccup right now in the system, and it's not just that, but helium that's used in sensitive production, that comes from there's no helium coming out. The global economy got hit by a big wave and went down, and it held, it came up, and it popped up. We had a period of time where we were able to get the oil back up, and Iran was able to sell 60 million barrels and bit of air, and Donald Trump's hitting them with a second wave. It's going to take them down. The problem is, this isn't just about somebody like the Scott Ritter equivalent drowning. We're talking about, if this goes south, if we don't get fertilizer to market and the crops go in, the crops fail. When the crops fail, people starve. We're talking about starvation on a scope and scale that's unimaginable. There's the potential, theoretically, of billions of people to die. I don't think it will get quite that bad, because there is some, there's some play in other parts of the global market that helps sustain a bad harvest or two. But if this continues, if this war continues, and we get a third wave or a fourth wave, hundreds of millions of people could die. Hundreds of millions of people in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia. People who will not have the fertilizer, people whose crops will fail. And when crops fail, when there is no food, how long do you think you could last if I just pulled all the food from your refrigerator right now? Pulled it from the store. You'd be hungry after a day. After 2 days, you'd be angry. After 3 days, you start to get weak. And after 4 days, you're desperate. We're 4 days away from global desperation. What happens to Europe when North Africa says, or what happens when the Sahel or West Africa, the whole migratory path out of West Africa through the Sahara into North Africa, that's something that's been around for a long time. One of the policies, the goal objective should have been to stabilize West Africa. Instead, we've allowed the French to destabilize West Africa. But we get this flow of people coming into North Africa and then coming across the Mediterranean into Italy and into France and on into, or they come through Turkey from the wars that we create. What happens when we succeed in starving tens of millions of Iranians? Where do you think they go? Go to Turkey.
They'll be flooding into Europe.
And where does Turkey send them? On to Greece, on to Bulgaria, and then they're in Europe. And Europe doesn't have the resources. This is going to be a global catastrophe, a global nightmare. We're talking about, changing human society forever. We don't understand desperation. We should probably go back and read the histories of the world, back when there was widespread famine. Read what happened in Russia and Ukraine and Kazakhstan in the great famines of the 1920s and 1930s, and just how desperate things were. Cannibalism, but people died by the millions. Here I'm talking about hundreds of millions of deaths because it's that serious of a situation. So Donald Trump's playing a very dangerous game. He's creating a situation where, he's trying to score political points against the Iranians, but the consequences is literally life and death for hundreds of millions of people around the world. And it's not just that they disappear. This isn't about erasing numbers. And there's going to be human suffering, but apparently we don't care because they're brown people, black people. They don't count. They don't look like me. But when the brown people and black people start moving, start taking action, it will disrupt the lives of white people in Europe. And there will be economic consequences of this that will resonate here in the United States as well. We're not immune to this. So there will be consequences for this. I already think that it's inescapable that millions of people are going to suffer because of what Donald Trump's done. Millions of people. I'm not saying they're dead yet. I'm not putting them in the ground. But if there's another wave, because Donald Trump can't sustain this. Remember, I had to sign the MOU. I was 4 weeks away of no oil. Well, Donnie, that's going to happen again. So you're going to have to breathe life in the MOU. You're going to bring out the MOU AED and bring it back to life. CPR, get it going. And then it come back to life. But it's just a fake. We know it.
And Iranians know it.
It's fake diplomacy. We're really good. We're not. We're negotiating in bad faith. It's hybrid just by a brief situational advantage to get the oil back up, and then we're just going to destroy the MOU again. But the Iranians are going to do it because they need to sell their oil on the market to keep their economy viable. There's not too many players out there that can ride this thing through. In fact, there's none. What we're betting on, I think, is through this chaos that's being engendered, is that China is going to say, we need stability. And they're going to put pressure on Iran to make a compromise with Trump. I think that's ultimately his objective. The Iranians may not do this, though. But the point is, we're going to have to, get up from this wave. Then the question is, politically, as we get closer to the midterm elections, is Donald Trump going to let the world get a big breath, or is the world going to go and he heads up the third wave? Because it's all about pressure. It's all about pressure. He made a decision, or somebody helped him make a decision, that we had allowed the world to suck in sufficient oxygen. We had gotten enough. We don't care about the rest of the world. We had gotten enough to ride out the second wave. But the world didn't. There's going to be a third wave because I don't think Trump's going to succeed. So he's going to have to allow for an MOU type window again, but it's negotiating in bad faith because the third wave will come. And that third wave, these are problems that, manifest themselves exponentially. That's a big word. Marines shouldn't use it, except I mean it. Again, it's the same thing. Oxygen deprivation in the body. I had a full, lungs of oxygen. I went down there, but then as I was being held down by the wave, the oxygen's, my body's depleting the oxygen. Now I come up, I get a little bit, boom, but I can't hold my breath for as long as I did before because I don't have as much oxygen and my body's already oxygen starved. The problem exponentially goes up. And the third time, the window of recovery, there is none. You're going to drown. And this is what's happening to the world. We may be able to only disrupt the lives of millions of people with this one wave. I hope that's the case. I hope nobody dies beyond the direct impact of war. But the second wave, the global system doesn't have the resilience. They're already oxygen deprived, and they didn't get enough oxygen to replace. They get enough rest. And the third time around, it's too late. The acids have built up, and you're just going to die. And I believe that hundreds of millions of people will die if we get to the third wave. These are things that we have to take into account when Donald Trump speaks, because Donald Trump is living in a fantasy world of his own construct. As the Iranians often says, he's negotiating with himself. But I believe he's negotiating with his strategy. His strategy is chaos. Yeah. He's manipulating chaos to create pressure on China so that China pressures Iran to make the compromises that will sustain him politically in the midterm elections.
Trump, as I said, was on Fox News. He was also asked about the potential of a ground invasion. I'm going to play a quick clip.
Are you ruling out a ground campaign in a limited capacity?
I don't want to say that either, but I would say no. If I thought it was appropriate, I'd say sometimes you need a ground campaign.
Sometimes you need a ground campaign. Scott, in what's the likelihood on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being it's all but sure? Do you think U.S. troops will ever be on the ground fighting in Iran?
There's a mission called a raid. And we already had U.S. troops fighting on the ground. We did a raid to rescue a pilot. We were in limited ground combat operations there. I think there's a high potential that the U.S. will conduct a raid here and there, because that's a very specific task. A raid is the only military mission where we plan to retreat. Every other military mission, there's no plan. You commit and you go. But a raid is in and out. So maybe we can do a raid. But the idea that we're going to land and seize territory, there's zero chance that will happen because there's zero chance of success.
So there will be
have the resources.
No ground invasion. That's out. You think that's out the window?
Let's put it this way. If we want to take Karg Island, we need more than 2 battalion landing teams, and that's all we got. If we want to take Kishim Island, we're going to need a couple Marine brigades, and we just don't have them ready to float. If we want to project power ashore in Chabahar, the war plans that I worked on in 1985, we're talking about 60 to 80,000 Marines and another 120 to 200,000 Army. We don't have those. So the answer is no. There will be no invasion or occupation of Iran. It's impossible, and Donald Trump knows it.
We've seen the evolution of Trump's relationship with Netanyahu at least play out in the media. Trump has at times, or at least his envoys, have told the press that there's tension between the two. They don't see eye to eye. Trump once called him a name. I forget the name. But do you think that Netanyahu calls the shots when it comes to Iran and the Middle East, and Trump just follows his lead? Or do you think it's more of a partnership? Or, as Trump has said repeatedly, he's the boss? Who ultimately decides, in your view, who's making the decisions on what to do with Iran?
My thoughts have evolved on this, and I'm allowed to have evolutionary analysis. That's what good analysts do. When this war started, I looked at Israel's role. You have cause and effect relationship. Benjamin Netanyahu arrives with the head of the Mossad, briefs Donald Trump on February 11th. Trump has a meeting with his cabinet and makes the decision to give the green light to it was a February 28th attack on I think 28th.
It was 28th.
I went, okay, there's a definitive cause and effect relationship here. And so Israel, while they may not be calling the shots, Israel is definitely, a major actor in the decision-making chain here. But now I take a look at the totality of events, because, there's a lot of data that's accumulated since then. None of the Israeli goals and objectives turned out to be viable. None of them. And it's actually put Israel in a weakened position. There's a reason why every president, including Donald Trump, prior to this decision, told the Israelis to pound sand when they said, "Will you help us bomb Iran?" I think since Bill Clinton, the answer has been nope, not going to do it. Not interested. No. And suddenly Trump says yes. He says yes when Marco Rubio said, there's not going to be regime change. The State Department doesn't concur with the Israelis on this. When Mike Ratcliffe, the CIA director, says the same thing, we don't concur on this. Everybody's like, well, we don't have the military forces, except Pete Hegseth, who probably, got excited and decided he was going to be tough and do push-ups and bench press 315 pounds. And we could take the Strait of Hormuz. But nobody else believed that. In fact, Trump knew that they couldn't, because not only did the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff tell him that they can't, but he knew this the last time around when the Iranians shot down a Global Hawk. If you remember in his first term, they shot down one of our big drones, and he was going to bomb air defense sites in Iran. And the Pentagon said, if you do that, you start a chain of escalation that leads to the Iranians shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, and we don't have the capacity to open the Strait of Hormuz. Shock. And in order to get the capacity, we would take 9 months to a year and a half to mobilize the 200 to 500,000 or 900,000 troops necessary to accomplish this mission. Maybe we don't want to bomb Iranian air defense sites. And Trump went, oh, okay. And he came up with the fiction about, well, I was ready to pull the trigger, the planes were in the air, and I pulled them all back. No, you were told you can't do it. So Trump knows this. I don't think he's senile. Even the Russians aren't saying he's senile. They say he's emotionally unstable, but they're not accusing him of senility like Biden was. So why then would he suddenly change something when everybody's telling him, except Pete Hegseth, that this can't be done? Why would he do it? And so I've sat back and, I've run this different scenarios. You have to go back and you have to reverse engineer the problem from different perspectives. Marco Rubio's perspective, Pete Hegseth's perspective, Radcliffe's perspective, back to Rubio because he's National Security Advisor's perspective, Scott Bessent's perspective. Boom. Suddenly, different perspective comes into play. See, Bessent's been playing the energy game the whole time. Bessent's been seeking to inject instability in the global energy market in a way that is detrimental to both Russia and China. That's his strategic objective. He wants to bring Russia's economy to its knees. He wants to make China dependent upon sources of energy that are controlled by the United States, so that we have our hands on the on-off switch, so that we can pressure the Chinese when it comes to global trade. This has been Bessent's thing. And what is Trump focused on? Listen to what he said. He said, I was forced to sign the MOU because we were running out of oil. Well, not we, but the world. And in order to mitigate against that, he had to do things like let the Russians sell energy, let the Iranians sell energy to China. It was not, this was not the direction Bessent wanted. So you knew at that point in time that this was over. And J.D. Vance pretty much admitted it was a temporary respite to reset the American clock, but we don't want the Chinese and the Russians to get reset too much. We come back in. Scott Bessent is looking for chaos. You see, we don't have the ability to take full control of the situation and manage it. We can't do that. We lack the capacity. If we do that, we'll get outflanked by OPEC Plus, we'll get outflanked by China. But what we can do is create chaos, total chaos, and manage the chaos. That's what we're doing. Creating total global energy chaos. And we're managing it to our benefit, to the detriment of China, to the detriment of Russia. It's painful for us. There's no doubt about it. And it's unsustainable in the long run. That's why you'll have these waves. But each wave puts China in a more difficult position than it puts us in. Each wave puts Russia in a more difficult position than it puts us in. Saudi Arabia. I mean, I was asked the question a little while ago, why did we let Saudi Arabia bomb Yemen? Chaos. Chaos. Do you think we're friends with Saudi Arabia? Do people think we're actually friends?
God.
No.
Trump embarrassed the crown prince recently. He kissed his
they embarrassed
backside.
Trump. They embarrassed Trump. The Saudis aren't looking to the United States for their salvation. The Saudis have pretty much declared independence from the United States because we have the energy. Well, you don't if the Houthi blow it up.
Yeah. Do you
You
think
don't
that
if we can get Iran to shut down the Bab el-Mandeb Strait where you have 70% of your energy flowing through. So Trump gave Saudi Arabia the green light to bomb Yemen, and now we have, say it after me, you got this chaos. So this is
Scott,
what we're doing.
is this the case? Do you think this is a case of making lemonade with lemons, or do you think that this was the administration's hope all along to sow chaos? Do you think the Trump administration was like, "Ooh, Iran didn't fold like Venezuela. Now that we're in this position, let's go this route"? Or do you think that sowing chaos with the energy market to impact China and Russia potentially, you think that was all along, or do you think that's making lemonade out of lemons?
I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
Foreign policy, national security policy is normally the byproduct of a very serious interagency process. And normally, the president will turn to his national security advisor and say, I have a vision. And the national security advisor say, thank you for giving me the vision. Let me take care of it. He'll call together a principals meeting and he'll say, this is the president's vision. I am tasking you with coming up with ways to implement this vision. And then each principal will get their deputies in and they task it down. And then they get interagency working groups that come together for the different problems. And they all sit there and think it through. I used to be part of interagency working groups. And you think it through, and then you bring it back up. You brief it to the deputies level. We're ready for the principals. You bring it into the principals. They say, we're ready to take it to the president. The president gets briefed on it, and he might tweak it here and there. Now we have policy. That doesn't happen in the Trump administration. Yeah. Policy comes from the social media postings of the president, who overnight can change everything. You know how frustrating it would be to work in Washington, D.C. now in the policy world, to sit there and spend 2 months going through the energy agency process, coming to brief the president, and then he just decides to wake up and while he's going to the bathroom at 3 a.m, post a social media post, and it undoes everything he did without consulting you. Now, the first time you're like, well, he's a president, so we try to fix it. And the next time he has midnight indigestion, he posts something else, and that undoes it. So they've given up. I believe that there is no detailed planning taking place, that basically Washington, D.C. is in 100% react mode, that every staff officer in every agency and department wakes up every morning reviewing Donald Trump's social media posting to see what their direction is. And they're reacting on that. So you can't have detailed planning. But what it does is it creates the mindset of, reactionary planning, meaning that you're reacting to what the president's saying. You're living in a chaotic world, which basically positions you to be a specialist in managing chaos. And I think that's where we're at right now, where people like Scott Bessent, all he has to do is say, I just need to create chaos. Because the beauty of chaos is you don't need detailed policy, policy projections. Chaos is just the antithesis of that. We don't have a policy. Do something and let it be chaotic. And wham, there it is. And then you just sit there and go, well, let's look at what's happening and see what. So it is about making lemonade out of lemons, but it's also, I think, that's what they wanted to do. I don't think Donald Trump had a clue what was going on when he started this war, except to create chaos. And he achieved that.
Last question, Scott. Scott Ritter. Everyone check out scottritter.com and follow it. We'll have a link down below. Last question, Scott. I think, Trump seems to me to be a reckless person with nuclear capabilities. And if any president, at least in recent memory, I would think Trump would be the one who potentially could use a nuclear weapon. Do you think that that's a risk with Iran? And then part B of that question is, what would happen? How would the world react if Trump went nuclear in this war?
Well, Ed, the reason why I voted for Donald Trump is I believed he was the president that wouldn't take us down this path. If you recall, in the summer of 2024, I was heavily involved in a campaign. I was working with Gerald on a campaign to bring awareness to the American people of the dangers of nuclear war. And, I had reached out to all three major candidates, and only one party responded. I had a dinner with RFK Jr., and I talked to him about this. And at that time, he wasn't the secretary. Now he was somebody who was, actively helping Donald Trump win. So he had some input, and he was working very closely with Donald Trump Jr. And I said, I really need the president to come out with a policy that says that he rejects the posture of the Biden administration regarding allowing long-range strike weapons in the hands of the Ukrainians, because this could create a real scenario where the Russians would have to use nuclear weapons, and we want to avoid that. I wrote a paper for him, and I gave it to him. He took it, went to Donald Trump Jr., and they rewrote it. But I'll tell you that the first 60% of that, the article they ended up publishing in The Hill, is my paper, word for word in some cases, and the ideas are there. And I'm not trying to take credit. I'm trying to say that, when people say, why did you vote for him? Well, because I have sort of firsthand experience in their being responsive. They were responsive to this. And then later on, so they put that marker on the table. Then later on, I went to Congress and worked with with congressional staff of some very senior members of Congress who have input into the White House. And I said, it's really important that the president make a statement that he will not continue the policies of the Biden administration when it comes to provision of ATACMS weapons because of the danger of nuclear weapons. Donald Trump shortly thereafter gave an interview, I believe, to Time magazine, where he said exactly that. And the Russians responded the way I had hoped the Russians would respond, saying, okay, if he won the election, he was president-elect at the time, we're not going to do anything precipitous right now. We're going to wait and see. All right, so when people say, you were irresponsible for voting for Donald Trump, I say, pound sand. It was the most responsible vote I've ever made, the most responsible vote, because there was the most consequences attached to it. Global nuclear war. People tend to forget that the Biden administration had made a decision in November to go to a nuclear war with Russia. They had made that decision. They were implementing policies that could have allowed Russia to trigger its nuclear posture. And we were briefed, we, the United States, indirectly were briefed in a question and answer period by the Rear Admiral, whose name I had it on my head, but he gave a presentation at a Washington, D.C. think tank, and he said, we are ready to have a nuclear exchange with the Russians and prevail. He made that statement. I went and asked the Congress people, had they heard this? And, what's going on? Do they believe? Because there's a lot of the media saying, oh, the CIA believes the Russians are bluffing about using nuclear weapons. And I said, what do you think? They said, well, we received that briefing. I said, okay, does the CIA believe that Russia's bluffing? They said, no. Actually, the CIA believes it's a very dangerous situation, that if we continue this policy, there's a greater than 50% chance. Guys, that's a coin toss of a nuclear war before Biden administration leaves office. But he said, that's not the scary thing. The scary thing is that the Biden administration senior people right there in that briefing And when we looked at them, they said, yeah, we're ready for a nuclear war with Russia. Okay, so that's where we were, where the Biden administration was ready to fight a nuclear war with Russia, and Donald Trump was saying all the right things about not wanting to fight a nuclear war with Russia. So my vote for Donald Trump was the best vote I ever made in my entire life, and I would do it again under those circumstances. But what we've learned is Donald Trump is an insane, irrational, egomaniac, narcissist who you can't trust anything he says at all. And so here we are today with him, posturing around. I think Donald Trump is a very dangerous man. I think that Donald Trump has already, according to some sources, asked the Pentagon to prepare nuclear strike options against Iran because the conventional strike options failed. But here's where the good news comes in. We're a constitutional republic. It's a beautiful thing. And we have a military that takes an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. They don't take an oath of loyalty to the president. They take an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The military is not allowed to obey an unlawful order. Now, I know you guys, Scott, they blew up the damn Venezuelan fishing boats. That was illegal as hell. I believe it was too, but somebody could articulate a cognizable case that we were allowed to do that. I'm not a lawyer, but somebody did. One of the many lawyers in the Pentagon said, "Oh, we can blow up that boat." I mean, some lawyers came up with some stupidity about justifying an act of perfidy. Hey, Iran, we've identified your nuclear weapons potential as the greatest threat, but we're going to have a negotiation. So that's raising the white flag. Come in and negotiate. We'll solve this. Because you can't implement preemptive self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. It is the international law. Unless you have an imminent threat. And an imminent threat has to be imminent with no other options to resolve it. And we declared the Iranian nuclear problem to be an imminent threat, but we were resolving it with negotiations that had a negotiating team flying to Washington, D.C., ready to put pen to paper and have a solution there. That was done. So there's no imminent threat, but we bombed Iran anyways, an act of perfidy, an illegal war of aggression. So people are like, Scott, quit quoting international law, you naive fool. No, I won't stop quoting because you know what? There are men and women in uniform who take the oath seriously. Everything we just talked about, lawyers can spin. Nuclear war can't be spun. And when we speak of nuclear war, the generals responsible understand a couple concepts. One is proportionality. You commit a war crime when you have a disproportional response to the threat. Nuclear weapons are the extreme threat. In fact, we have a policy, because the question is, how do you define proportionality? We have a policy that says that nuclear weapons are for deterrence only. Nuclear deterrence. That's it. So if somebody attacks us or threatens us with nuclear weapons, we can use nuclear weapons. There is no imminent threat out of Iran of a nuclear nature, none whatsoever. So there's literally no justification under proportionality. Then there's the distinction. You have to be able to distinguish between military and civilian. And again, you have to say that we're striking something for a military purpose, and that military purpose has to override disproportional civilian casualties, and you can't justify that with nuclear. And so both times, according to sources in Washington, D.C., not mine, I have to tell you, it's not my reporting, I'm just reporting the reporting of others. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Both times, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, we're not going down that path, Mr. President. It's unconstitutional. We're not doing that. And that's why I'm not worried about Donald Trump going to nuclear war in Iran. He may want to do it, but the system won't allow him to do it. Now, Ukraine's a different game. Now we're getting, we haven't talked about Ukraine, but there are scenarios where we could provoke Russia into doing things. So far, Vladimir Putin's been so much smarter than everybody, and he's refused to take the bait. But, you have Germany right now. Did you see the insanity of this? Well, first of all, you have Chris Donahue, back before he got fired, saying that we can take out Kaliningrad anytime we want. We have the ability to do that. The Russians are like, really? Thought we got a vote. And our vote, of course, will be niet. That means you're dead. But now Germany's saying we have to take Crimea back from Russia. Crimea is not Russia. It belongs to Ukraine. We have to correct the historical record. And while we're at it, we're going to correct Kaliningrad. So now Germany's saying that Kaliningrad's German and that Russia has to give it back, or have it taken.
Oh, good.
Lithuania is saying we need to put pressure on Russia so they give up Kaliningrad. And I'm just like, that will end badly, because Kaliningrad is, after all, constitutionally and emotionally Mother Russia. Kaliningrad is a byproduct of the Great Patriotic War, where Nazi Germany came in and killed 27 million Soviet citizens, most of them Russian, and the Soviet Union counterattacked, defeated Nazi Germany and dismantled it. And Kaliningrad was, the price Germany paid. It's a permanent reminder of Germany's defeat. And Russia now owns it. It is Russian. It's not German. There's no Germans living there. They all are Russian. They speak Russian. They think like Russian. And if you attack it and seek to remove it, you're attacking Mother Russia, and you'll get nuked. And so there's a danger right now if Donald Trump starts to play stupid games and say, "Hey, let's tickle Kaliningrad." Well, you tickle the bear, you get bit. That's just the reality. And on that one, now when we're talking about Russia and the potential, the military might say, well, we have no choice but to use nuclear weapons to respond to a Russian nuclear attack or to preempt a Russian nuclear attack. So it's a different scenario than Iran. Yeah. In Iran, the military has at least twice said they will not follow that order because it's unconstitutional.
Would Russia step in?
Good.
Would Russia or China step in if the U.S. used a nuke on Iran? Not that it's likely to happen, but if Russia sits back and China sits back and watches something like that, do you think that they would then intervene and launch nukes at mainland USA?
I don't think they'd launch at mainland USA, but remember, nuclear deterrence is a delicate thing. It was made simple when we all agreed that nuclear wars can't be won, therefore they should never be fought. And then we further, quantified that in terms of mutually assured destruction. Why won't we fight a nuclear war? Because if we use a nuclear weapon, use it, and we all die. And we all agree that that can't be done. And that's sort of the nuclear balance. I mean, even as recently as February of 2022, we had the 5 major nuclear powers come together and reaffirm that nuclear wars cannot be fought, therefore they should never be cannot be won, therefore should never be fought. So now we have this delicate balance where we pretend that that's the case. Nobody's going to use nuclear weapons first. Now, if the United States uses nuclear weapons against Iran, we just use nuclear weapons. All of that doctrine goes out the window. And now the world has to look at the United States not as a nuclear power that is bought into the notion that nuclear wars can't be won, therefore they should never be fought, but actually embraces a different strategy. Nuclear wars can be won, therefore they will be fought. And when you have that, you've got to build your own posture to respond. And you can't allow the situation, I believe, to exist where you've never used nuclear weapons. In order to stop the insanity of the United States, you must demonstrate that you too believe that nuclear wars can be won, therefore nuclear weapons will be used. And so they will find a situation to use nuclear weapons. And then, I don't want to breathe life into something, but, Karaganov doctrine, in 2023, Sergei Karaganov, a big political scientist, influential, wrote a paper where he said that Russia should nuke Poznan in an extreme situation, but Russia could use nuclear weapons against Poznan and Poland under the belief that the United States would not risk Boston in response. Putin dismissed that and rejected that. But if the United States uses nuclear weapons, that changes the entire equation. And I do believe that both Russia and China will have to demonstrate that they too are insane and capable of using nuclear weapons, because that's the only way you can return balance to it. You can't let the United States get out ahead of them by saying, oh, we can use nuclear weapons anytime we want to without consequence. There will have to be a consequence. I don't believe that Russia is going to attack the continental United States, and I don't believe that China would attack the continental United States. But I do believe that China would use nuclear weapons against Taiwan in a limited event, and I do believe that Russia, therefore, would be freed up to use nuclear weapons to resolve the Ukrainian conflict one way or another. It's just a path we don't want to go down.
Scott Ritter, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for taking some time out today to talk.
Thanks for having me.